It seems like half of everybody misunderstood Constantine Simonides, and the rest only understood about half the story. It seems few, if any, understood a central aspect of Simonides' character. Simonides had spent years trying to obey his great uncle's living wish and dying dream. His great uncle Benedict asked Simonides to take all his manuscripts and books bought, collected, and found, transcribe them by hand, and get them printed and published. But to keep the originals safe, away from non-orthodox, prying, greedy hands. And now, 1862 to 63, it seems all the problems of his life were at a head because of trying to keep his promise to his great uncle. But some people said Simonides' uncle didn't exist. He was all a figment of Simonides' rich imagination. They said he was a genius, but an evil genius. And his great talent for copying manuscripts had turned him into a counterfeiter. It seems he could make copies of anything with amazing speed, except for one document. Simonides openly and willingly claimed to have written the Codex Sinaiticus. But despite all the near miraculous powers the English and German newspapers and journals claimed that he had, that one creation was clearly beyond Simonides' ability. Or was it? And now they were openly proclaiming almost everything he said to be a lie, including about his own background and his great uncle himself, whom he just called Uncle Benedict. Was Benedict real? Was Simonides for real? Where did he get his abilities, skills, and talents? Was he from a family of cons? Was he taught by counterfeiters? And was he such a liar that if he said it was sunny, you'd run out and grab an umbrella? That's how he was portrayed. But how can we, in the 21st century, take apart a story like his and to compare it to, say, the greatest text discoverer of the 19th century, Constantine Tischendorf? I've used 4 criteria, and I would like to share them with you. Then you can make knowledgeable decisions about Simonides and Tischendorf and a host of others I will show you. I hope you'll see a clearer picture emerge about what sort of man Simonides really was. Then you can decide if Simonides' claim is true, that he is the true author of the Codex Sinaiticus. Ready? Hi, I'm David Daniels from Chick Publications. Let me tell you as I begin. When these videos are complete, you will be able to see, logically and clearly, where Sinaiticus came from, who made it, what happened to it, where the missing pieces are, where it went, who did it, and why. But in order to show you all this, you have to first understand the backstory. And that comes by comparing history with Simonides' testimony. But how can I look at Simonides' testimony about his great uncle Benedict and tell whether Simonides told the truth or not? Here are 4 guidelines I used. 1. Corroborating witness. If I find an institution or person with a good reputation who agrees that something happened, then that is a testimony in Simonides' favor. 2. Detailed knowledge. If I find that Simonides had detailed information about a place or event that most people would likely not have, that is an indication that either Simonides was there or he learned that information from someone who was there. 3. time-specific knowledge. If I find that Simonides lists events that happen for a limited amount of time within a narrow time frame, and that story lists specifics that were not common knowledge, that indicates that either Simonides was there at that time or he learned that information from someone who was there in that limited time frame. 4. Consistent actions or events. If someone tells about a person doing something that I can historically find him doing in another place around that time, we can say that this event is consistent with his behavior and therefore plausible. The book of Acts is an amazing example of this. Luke tells about people, places, and events that were only known about in small areas during short periods of time. And in the last 200 years, we have found more evidence that matches what Luke told about in archaeology, histories, and testimonies of others who lived in those days. And Luke's account of ship voyages tell about tiny details only an eyewitness would know. Yet Luke mentions them only as incidental events, nothing momentous. So it's very hard to poke holes in Luke's writing. And most people believe those events happened just the way Luke said. I told you in the last video about how I realized that I'd never caught Simonides in a lie, and that I should start treating him as innocent until proven guilty. But to do that, I would have to pay close attention to what he wrote. Then, if I was careful, I would find out whether his stories rang true or not. So, let's begin with his own great-uncle Benedict. Simonides said his uncle Benedict began his work, quote, while professor in the College of Sidon in the year 1784, end quote. Is there or was there a College of Sidon? I told you before that Greek places seem to have 2 or 3 names. Well, I found it. It was the College or Academy of Sidonia, but it's also called Kudonius, or Ibali, or Ivalik. It means fruit or quince in Turkish and Greek. Actually, right there. I'll only quote parts, but in the monthly review of December 1827, it said, on the coast of Asia Minor, opposite the delightful town of Mytilene, stood lately the town of Sidonia, now a heap of ruins. Its inhabitants were entirely Greeks. Then it says it was proposed to make a big college there. The College of Sidonia became the most frequented of the East. According to Simonides, his uncle taught there for 35 years, starting in 1784, retiring in 1819. That makes historical sense. The College of Sidonia thrived from 1771 to 1821. In fact, in 1821, says the article, Sidonia and its population were swept away by a catastrophe. That was when the Ottoman Turks destroyed the city. What did Benedict do at the college? Simonides said that his uncle, quote, by profession a theologian and versed in 12 languages, intending to publish both the Old and New Testaments and the writings of the apostolic fathers, church leaders right after the apostles, with exegetic scholia, interpreting comments, of the ancient commentators, and specially to reply to what had been written against the Septuagint, began this work while professor in the College of Sidon in the year 1784. In other words, his great-uncle was a highly educated theologian. He wanted to prove wrong all those who doubted the Alexandrian Septuagint. He wanted to make his own books. Think about what this means. Starting in 1784 at the Academy, Benedict got the idea to create his own Alexandrian Greek and Old and New Testaments. Benedict also started to work on carefully analyzed writings by church leaders who lived in the generation after the apostles. He wanted to purify those writings in Greek. So it's clear that Benedict didn't like the Byzantine text of his own Eastern Orthodox religion. He wanted the Alexandrian, just like the paleographers of the West did. So Benedict was a radical. But guess what? What Simonides wrote about Benedict is consistent with the real purpose of the Academy of Cydonia. Starting in 1773, the Ottoman Empire granted the seaside town of Cydonia a form of independence and removed the Muslim residents. It became so popular that people flocked to it from all over the Aegean Sea, making this Turkish town an Orthodox city. The Academy was built in the midst of a 50-year intellectual revival, as the Encyclopedia Britannica put it. Right there in Turkey, outside of Greece, the intelligentsia were even debating which of three kinds of Greek people should use. One was the Demotic, of the educated people. A second was the cleansed Greek, the Katharavousa, which was like ancient Attic Greek. And a third was something in between. The Greeks had established three big centers of learning on the east side of the Aegean Sea. At the Isle of Chios, right here. At the Philological Gymnasium of Smyrna, here. And the most significant at the Academy of Cydonia, right here. At these colleges, they were conspiring to make Greece great again. And it's consistent with history. Benedict retired in 1819 after 35 years of teaching. That's perfect timing. But first, guess where he retired to? Where else? Mount Athos. Now, I have to tell you a secret. Benedict's birth name was not Benedict. He actually had two names, Basileus and Bessarion. In researching monastic life on Athos, I found that when a person becomes a monk, he doesn't keep his former name. He usually takes the first letter of his name and picks a saint whose name starts with the same letter. So, Uncle Basileus, or Bessarion, chose the B name Benedict. And I found another point of correlation with Simonides' words. I found in the Encyclopedia of the Hellenic World that after 1780, a generous man, Ioannis Oikonomos, went into the lower working class district of Cydonia, and on the courtyard of the Virgin of the Orphans Church, he created an elementary school. It had 4 teachers. One of the 4 was Bessarion of Syme. In Greek, B or beta can become a V in English. So, according to Simonides, Basileus became or was Bessarion, who became Benedict. B, B, B. There are many things Simonides wrote about that didn't make sense to me until I found out more about Eastern Orthodox customs. Another example of a monk who did this was Benjamin or Benjamin of Lesbos, 1762 to 1824. His birth name was also Basileus. When he became a monk at Pantocrator Monastery, he took the name Benjamin. Later, from 1799 to 1812, he also taught at Cydonia Academy, just like Simonides said Benedict did under the name Bessarion. But it turns out that Benjamin of Lesbos was quite a controversial character. You probably know that in general, universities are almost always more liberal than the communities around them. In Benjamin's case, he was supported by rich people from Sidonia to study in Paris, England, all sorts of places. When he returned to Sidonia, he brought teachings so unlike Orthodox religion that they were condemned by the Patriarchate in Constantinople in 1803. But rich and important people like the Metropolitan of Ephesus came to his defense and kept him teaching. Why is this so important? Because that's what Benedict was like. Think about it. According to Simonides, Benedict was preparing a Bible based on Alexandrian and other Egyptian documents, completely different from the Byzantine text of the Orthodox Church. If Benedict published what he wanted, he would have spread all over the Orthodox world a heretical Bible. Sound familiar? Religious professors spreading heresy by means of a false Bible? So, though Benedict was an Orthodox monk, his beliefs were far from Orthodox teaching. Simonides said that in 1819, his great-uncle Benedict started monastic life in the monastery of Esphigmenou on the Aegean side of Athos. For decades he had collected manuscripts. Now was the payback. Simonides said he collected the most ancient manuscripts of both testaments and of their commentators, and at considerable expense prepared his work for the press. But on February 22nd, 1821, the Greek War for Independence interrupted his studies. At this point in history, no one can dispute what Simonides said Benedict did. Benedict fled Mount Athos and went to safer places, finally settling on the Isle of Poros. Simonides said, quote, "The Greek Revolution interfered. He withdrew after a little time to the island of Hydra, thence to Cythera, thence to Patsaris, and finally to Calarea, now Paros, where there is a famous monastery of the Virgin, in which he remained a long time, teaching theology to 12 Greek youths by the command of Capodistrias, governor of Greece." This matches the history books as well. I think Patsaris is a misreading of Spetses, where Benedict taught at the school in 1828. Calarea is Calabria. Paros is a misreading of Poros, which is a pair of islands with Calabria as the northern island. The famous monastery Simonides refers to is the Monizo Ducu Pigis Calabria, the holy monastery of the life-giving spring or fountain, meaning Mary as the mother of God. Simonides said Benedict was instructed by Ioannis Capodistrias, the first governor of Greece, to teach a school starting with 12 youths right there in the eastern wing of the monastery. The history books say 15, but gaining or losing 3 students is nothing unusual. Yet Capodistrias didn't want religious education, just the basics. That didn't sit well with the Orthodox monks there, but that's not all. In September of 1828, Governor Capodistrias hosted the ambassadors from Great Britain, France, and Russia on Poros to draw the borders of the new Greek state. One short history of Syme says that at this time, Benedict, the monk from Syme, wrote a personal letter to Capodistrias asking for the Isle of Syme to be included as part of Greece. But the London Protocol of 1830 said no. So Simonides' home of Syme stayed under the Muslim Ottoman Empire. On October 9th, 1831, Governor Capodistrias was assassinated. The monks disbanded the school and left Benedict free to leave Poros and return to Mount Athos, this time to Panteleimon Monastery, just like Simonides said. Panteleimon was ruined under the Ottomans. Benedict used his finances to fix it up, along with other buildings. He earned great respect and was entrusted with many manuscripts. A lot of them came from his first monastery, Sphigmenu. In 1837, Benedict was let in on a secret. An aged monk named Gregory, on his deathbed, told Benedict, whom he looked up to, where to find a stash of manuscripts. But it wasn't as easy as all that. He would have to be careful. Athos wasn't part of the Greek state either. It was still under the watchful eye of the Ottomans, and they would take whatever manuscripts were discovered for the Turkish government. I have more to tell about that, but in the next video. At this time, his great-nephew, Constantine Simonides, was staying at Panteleimon studying under Benedict for 14 months. Based on what Simonides wrote, from 1837 to 1839, Benedict kept at his task, creating an Alexandrian Septuagint that he thought was oldest and best, along with what he thought were the best copies of the 7 so-called apostolic fathers: Barnabas, Hermas, Clement, Bishop of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, Polycarp of Smyrna, Papias, and Dionysius the Areopagite. Benedict used all his manuscripts acquired during 35 years of teaching, the manuscripts received from Sphigmenu and other monasteries, and the great find entrusted to him by the dying Gregory. From these, Benedict distilled a main text of each that he liked. I can tell you right now, based on the kind of schools where he taught and his reason for the research, it wasn't going to be a manuscript that was pleasing to the Orthodox church authorities. It was going to be a thoroughly different Alexandrian Bible, and his best guesses at the best copies of the other writings as well. So, according to Simonides' testimony, as well as the history of Greek politics and the histories of Cydonia, Syme, Athos, Poros, and researches by historians, Benedict was a generous, not so orthodox professor monk. And now he was working on his greatest project, a Septuagint Greek Bible that would prove all the naysayers wrong, in his opinion, of course. And now he was working on that in private, but all that working in private by candlelight really messed with his 70-something-year-old eyes. He couldn't see well anymore to complete the project he had in mind. But he knew someone who could see. Not only that, he could read, draw, and copy with amazing speed. That person was Constantine Simonides. This is the groundwork for how I think Codex Sinaiticus was created, and what happened to it, and why. There's a lot to think about in this video. Take your time, check my information if you want. I've made subtitles. Next, I will tell you about how Constantine Simonides, Benedict's great-nephew, fits into Benedict's plan. I will go into his background and education, following the same principles as I did for Benedict. Until then, God bless you and have a wonderful day.